Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Extra Serving, a restaurant industry podcast by the Last Bite Network, a product of Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality. I'm your host, Holly Petrie, here with the latest episode. This week on Takeaway, Sam had Paul D'Amico, CEO of Fuzzy's Taco Shop, on the pod during a special episode taped during IFMA's COEX. On In the Kitchen with Brett Thorne, Brett stopped by to speak with Cafe Grumpy's Caroline Bell in New York City. And now it's time to introduce my co-hosts for the episode.
My name is Sam Okus, editor-in-chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
And my name is Leanne Zinsmeister, managing editor of Nation's Restaurant News.
Our new permanent co-host, by the way.
Yes.
Yay!
What, such a promotion. I bet you're so proud. You're like, they're holding me hostage. Why did they make me do this?
Don't help. Yeah, I appreciate you calling that out though, and not just like waiting like several months before the listeners are like, oh, so she's just always there, isn't she?
Like, are we ever going to get rid of her? Like, whatever happened? Why did they?
Why is she always there?
No, I think the decision for Holly and me was all about maybe we should have somebody smarter be on this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Someone with actual knowledge.
And you thought of me.
Yep. Actually, I just wanted a fellow Ohioan to be able to counteract all of Holly's complete no knowledge on anything that happens outside of New York City. I'm just trying to balance it a little bit more.
Someone to back you up on other people eat at Wendy's.
Yes.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like a stretch, but it was necessary with Holly
apparently
as my co-host. Yeah.
And all sports things other than baseball.
All sports references.
Well, happy to be here and happy to back Sam up in all arguments that you two break out in.
Unfortunately, that's all Leanne's here
arguments, for. Leanne, come on. You'll be on my side for some of them.
We'll see.
Oh, okay. That's really why we want you. We want you here as a tiebreaker.
That's a challenge. I'm just going to start instigating fights between you two and then seeing which side I come down on. That's the new podcast, actually.
Well, we just spent 3 days together at COEX, and we got into several spats.
Yes, which is why I'm accompanying you both to Dallas next week as a referee.
Yes, you need to step in and stop us from eating so much doggone food, which was something we did in Austin, and learned that we have only so much room to put food into our bodies. Interesting lesson to learn at this point in your life, but okay.
Yeah,
look forward to it.
We really learned the limits of our stomachs.
And as a preview, just so it's not just a gross thing that people are listening to, but as a preview to some future content, we were filming at some very cool restaurants in Austin. While we were in town for COEX, we got out and went to some restaurants. So that is coming soon, some special video of that. But just know when you watch it that we are near death, literal near death from a food coma as we record those things.
Watch this content so it's not all for naught.
Please. I gained 10 pounds in 2 days. Please watch it.
I went running both days, so I kind of washed it off.
Your work travel style confuses me every time we travel together.
You're responsible when you travel and not when you're at home. Is that how it goes?
I'm responsible at home.
She's good at home too. No, she's good at home. She really balances she like goes full on into both work and play and health when she's on the road, and I don't.
Yeah, kudos to Holly. That was something I did not do either. So well done.
I did not see you at the gym either morning.
No, I not to go too TMI here, but whenever I stay in a hotel with a lot of other people I know, I don't really want to go to the gym. I don't know. Just like, if I'm going to run into the CEO of a big chain at the gym in my hotel, it just to me is like, maybe I'm just going to skip it today.
I did run into a few of the CEOs that we had interviewed at the hotel workout room. No names. Well, we did not make eye contact with each other because we all know the rules.
They don't want to see you either. So
the rules are you don't want to see each other. You don't look.
No.
Yeah.
That's the rule.
You could be reporting on them. That would be,
it's an unspoken rule.
Avoid you for that reason. Like, oh, the press is here.
We could do a gallery of like these 12 restaurant CEOs work out when they're.
You know what, Leanne? That's a very responsible thing for you to think about. Like, how could I get content out of this? I'm at the gym
Literally always just trying to figure out how we can make more content.
That's why she's here.
My job.
Yeah, that's your job. There you go. Okay. In Dallas, may that be a warning to anybody we stay in a hotel with when we go to Dallas for the Women's Food Service Forum in 2 weeks. One of you want to give more information about that?
I'll let Leanne take it away.
That's
Don't
pretty
jump
much
on it all at once.
The three of us will be at the Women's Food Service Forum in like a week and a half, March 20th through 22nd. We will have a podcast recording area set up, I believe, near the bookstore, between the bookstore and the tourist area, right?
Podcast lounge,
I think is
what we say these days. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Well, I'm not up on it because I wasn't in Austin, but
it's okay. You'll get there.
We will be there recording podcasts with board members and speakers at WFF. And you'll be able to stop by, watch us record. So please do that. We'll be there, I believe, like in a pretty like open area, like at the front. So should be pretty easy to find us. Come say hello.
And if nobody's sitting with us at the time, just go ahead and sit down. Maybe you'll be on a podcast.
Yeah.
Yep. We definitely invited people from the audience to be on our podcasts at COEX. So we are open to having new guests who just kind of stop by.
Yeah. All perspectives.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
We love to get all perspectives on our podcast. And you'll hear some of those in the next few weeks from COEX.
Yep.
Our interview today is actually an interview from COEX. So very exciting. I won't spoil it until the end. It's going to be a surprise.
Got to stick around.
You got to stick around to hear the interview, but it is from COEX. So little touch of COEX in this week's pod. So why don't we get into the news, guys, because it's super depressing. It's been it's been a week of depressing news. Let's start with the most depressing news. I know I'm going out of order of my outline. I send an outline every week, but for the listeners, I'm going out of order of my outline, but I want to start with the most depressing news first, which is every major brand reacting to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We had brands like McDonald's, Papa John's without the apostrophe. We had Domino's, Subway, all reacting, putting out statements over deals with international franchising, bringing up all these issues with how do you internationally franchise, bringing up issues of closing units and stopping international deals. Yum put out statements about their KFCs and all of these things. I mean, it's a whole mess. It's a whole mess of things. What is going on? What do we think? What are we doing?
Well, the depressing nature of this news is the Ukraine invasion in the first place, I should say. Yeah. I would say commend all of the businesses for pulling out of Russia. So that's not depressing, but just the fact that all this has to happen in the first place is, I mean, look, two things for starters. It does make me very proud to see that our country can unite about something for once in a long time, because this is an easy thing to unite on, to support Ukraine and to inflict pain on Russia via sanctions, as these businesses are doing. And there was another part of it, which is that a lot of companies are just kind of being held to account. I mean, there's social media out there saying, oh, so-and-so is still doing business in Russia, which is a little bit of a gun to the head. No pun intended, maybe not the greatest reference there, but it's so on one hand, they couldn't not do anything because it's just the world we live in. But at the same time, I do feel like everybody is quickly making this decision because it's the right decision to do. Now, what we're discovering really in real time here is how much of a complicated decision that is, because we just learned before we recorded that Putin's talking about opening up the McDonald's again by changing trademark law in Russia. We know that Papa John's might not be able to close their restaurants according to their franchise agreements. That some companies are just going to have to like donate proceeds of franchise agreements because they can't officially close it. So it is very complicated. And of course, McDonald's, the scope of McDonald's in Russia with 850 restaurants in that country is just insane. So ultimately, hopefully this is a short-term thing that once, God willing, there's a ceasefire and can go back to normal. It's not looking like it, but I just leave it by saying proud of the restaurant industry for acting, because we've got to do something.
Yeah. Restaurants are also doing their best to support their employees in those countries. I know McDonald's is continuing to pay the salaries for their workers in Russia while the restaurants are closed, which I think is important because it's not the Russian people's fault that this is happening. And a number of companies, including Yum Brands, are doing as much as they can to donate to and support their employees in Ukraine as well. So like Sam said, just proud of the industry for doing everything that they can. And hopefully it's short-lived.
Yeah, and the industry has also been supporting Ukraine. So we've seen a lot of people, we've seen donations, we've seen Jose Andres, we've seen World Central Kitchen helping Ukraine. We've seen restaurants pouring out vodka in support of Ukraine.
Which, by the way, not a great, not the greatest.
Not really
thing.
support.
Nobody really wins there,
but also because most vodka is not Russian. That's sold in this country. So just look at the bottle first.
But we've seen the restaurant industry supporting Ukraine as well as making a stand against Russia. So we've seen both sides of the equation on this, which has been really nice to see everybody kind of come together and stand together as one.
And to reiterate something Leanne said too, you know, I don't see Eater, somebody had a piece up about, maybe it was the Times, about a Russian restaurant that got vandalized in New York. And like, that's not the response here, folks. Like, to reiterate what Leanne said, it's not the Russian people's fault. And especially when you have Russian owners, operators here in the States who are vocally supporting Ukraine, like it's, you know, don't get off on, don't go onto the silly train and, you know, do something stupid like that. Like, you know, find out what is something that makes an impact, and, you know, supporting financially Ukraine is a great way to do that. Don't get angry toward people whose fault this is not theirs.
Absolutely.
There's a really great Ukrainian diner in New York City that got really famous overnight. I mean, it was already really well known, but it got really famous overnight. It's called Veselka because there was lines around the block, like circling around the block, because it's a Ukrainian owned and operated place in basically what is Little Ukraine in New York. And people were flocking there to celebrate it and to eat there and to just celebrate Ukraine and to show their support. And it was just such a touching story to see that. I just got like little goosebumps saying it.
That's a good way to show support. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good way to show support, is to support businesses that are doing, that are Ukrainian, that are doing the right thing, that are to show your support, to put your money where your mouth is, quite literally. But you're also helping the restaurant industry. That's also struggling because Restaurant Revitalization Fund is out of the picture officially. Look at that transition.
What a segue.
Wow.
I knew where you were going with that. Man, Holly. Oh boy.
That was a good one.
Oh, is there a question? you like to leave us hanging.
Well, Restaurant Revitalization Fund is out of the picture. The omnibus spending bill will be voted on tomorrow, Friday. We're recording this on Thursday, but it's out of the picture. It's believed that there may be another spending bill in the future that may have a smaller bill that may have RRF in it, but it's looking highly unlikely. But it's not going to pass now. What are restaurants going to do? There was still like under almost 200,000 restaurants that were on the list, didn't get funds. I mean, what are restaurants to do? They still need the help.
Yeah, I mean, the senators who have been fighting for RRF have absolutely done a great job fighting for restaurants. This, unfortunately, is not a surprise. I don't know, between the three of us, like probably none of us expected it to be in the final bill, but it's obviously really disappointing. And I mean, unfortunately, I mean, a lot of those small independent restaurants have said that they're just gonna have to close. And like, that's not a helpful, useful answer, but that's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, it's hard to change the minds of anybody in Congress right now when so much attention is being paid to Ukraine. And, I think it was 13 billion was passed in aid to Ukraine. And so, unfortunately, something like the RRF slides down the priority list. And, it's interesting because Holly, we heard this from so many people when we were at COEX, which was sales are through the roof. They keep talking about how much sales are setting records and have certainly returned and then some. But it's easy to forget that sales aren't everything. You still have costs, and right now costs are through the roof. And B, that the sales are not, that's not shared by every restaurant. And there's still a lot of nuance to this where there are just restaurants that are still struggling or saddled with, the burden of everything they've done for the last 2 years. They're digging themselves out of a hole with that. So it is a sad place to be in. And hopefully the industry can figure out ways to support itself in terms of being able to rally customers around independent businesses. Just this day and age, even without a war in Ukraine, it's hard to get the attention of anybody because there's so much stuff going on at any one time. But yeah, it's just the result is going to be more restaurants are going to close.
For sure, especially the smaller independent restaurants. Unfortunately, when sales go up, that tends to happen at the big guys first. And we've seen it in our recent earnings reports. Almost every chain has been reporting positive same-store sales numbers for a while now, and that's just not so much the case for the smaller independent restaurants.
Yeah, it's sad. And those mom and pops are the ones that they're your neighborhood places that you go to. They're where you go when you need a sandwich, when you just need somewhere to eat a good breakfast. That's where you go on the weekend.
Yeah, so, I don't know about you guys, but for sure places are still closing down all the time in my neighborhood in Brooklyn. So it's very sad.
I live in a suburb, so pretty much every chain's doing just fine. So, yeah.
I'm so happy for you, Sam.
Thank you. And I can say from my perspective, it's, can you imagine? Although to be fair, tonight I am doing dinner. We're taking out from a local business. So not saying I only do all the chains. I like to spread the love around a little bit.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Will you be watching Encanto while you eat your local dinner?
No, I will be packing my house.
Fun. Very fun.
Yeah, which is something I've been doing for basically every waking minute since we returned from Austin. So.
Oh, very fun. I still haven't unpacked from Austin.
Yeah.
Should you at this point, or just take the same bag to Dallas?
Leanne, I don't know if there's somehow for you to mediate whatever's happening here. But,
I'm not really sure what's happening here, to be honest.
I'm talking about packing my house because I'm moving, and Holly can't even unpack a bag from traveling. So that's where we are as people.
Yeah, well, I think, Sam, you're moving from one suburb to another suburb in a different part of the country, while Holly's just sitting in her Manhattan apartment. Your lives are very different, Sam. You have 2 children and watch Encanto several times a day. And Holly has no children and has seen Encanto once, as far as I know.
One time.
Yeah, so just totally different worlds here.
Wow, Leanne knows us so well, Holly.
She does. She knows me very well.
That was impressive.
I gotta say, you both talk a lot.
We do.
So we have one commonality. We share one thing in common, Holly and I. We both talk too much.
Yes, yeah. You both talk
hair.
a lot, and you both talk to me. No.
Or Leanne.
Brown hair and talk a
lot. What if Leanne's not on the podcast? We just tell her that so we can just tell her. We just talk to her. We just use this time to just talk to Leanne.
Oh, do you don't think I listen to the podcast?
She does. Sometimes she tells me things from it.
Yeah. Sometimes I listen when I'm not on, or I'll listen to one of your interviews just so I can drop a fact from it in the conversation, just so you know I'm always watching, listening, so to speak.
Well done. Smart.
Okay, well, we do have one more piece of news to cover.
Right.
Oh, we should do that.
We still do have one more piece of news to cover before we get too off track, before we jump the shark.
Is Holly the one keeping us on track right now?
Yes, that was terrifying.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Well, just like I'm trying to regulate this conversation.
No, that was a terrible transition. I object.
Yeah. You're trying way too hard here.
Sometimes you can just say the news.
In other news, that's also a transition.
In other news, Biden is attempting to regulate the cryptocurrency market that has become the wild, wild west out there. So what do we think? I mean, it's going to be a big task. It's really affected the restaurant industry, I think, more so than a lot of other industries. This cryptocurrency world, we've seen a lot of news with NFTs and Bitcoin, especially recently, news about the metaverse. It's been affecting the restaurant industry a lot more than other industries recently. How do we think that this news is going to impact this booming industry that we're seeing on our side?
You know, I think our regular listeners will know that I am far from the authority on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
You're no Lisa Jennings.
I am no Lisa Jennings. We're going to have to bring her back next week. Yeah, and Joanna Fantozzi. They're going to have to come join us and explain this a little bit more. But my impression of this news is that it's actually, I think some people were expecting this to kind of be like some death blow on cryptocurrency, or at least to be, you know, that it would be bad news for crypto somehow. But the impression I'm getting is that it actually could be a net positive, in that I don't think Biden went as hard as he could have at cryptocurrency, didn't regulate it as much as he could have. And a lot of the proposals are really just to figure out how to responsibly manage this rise in cryptocurrency and not let it continue to be the Wild West. Because the fact that it continues to be the Wild West, I mean, there's just so much volatility in this market. It's just all over the place. And so it seems to me like what he's trying to do here is to just make sure we understand what this is, and make sure that, you know, the US can take advantage of this too, talking about, you know, digitizing currency and all of that. And then there's a whole climate change part of this too that I don't understand at all, and I don't know how to just even get into that. But it does sound like at the very least that some of this is responding to that, and to make sure it's not bad on the climate. I don't know how Bitcoin is bad on the climate, so please email me and tell me. Anyway, so for all the restaurants that have been exploring cryptocurrency, I think the news to the industry should be that long-term, this should be a good thing, because if you wade into this kind of sketchy industry without much guardrails to it, it could end up really hurting your business. If the government gets involved, I know everybody does not like government involvement. I get that. But if there's some regulation on this, then hopefully it can be, in the long run, better for business.
Well, and the Bitcoin stock, didn't it, or the price of Bitcoin, something about Bitcoin. I don't understand Bitcoin clearly. Clearly, I don't. I think Bitcoin stock jumped 11%. Bitcoin jumped 11%.
You could say anything about Bitcoin and it would be like, sure.
Well, I have no idea. Bitcoin jumped 11%. I believe the value of Bitcoin is fixed, but I believe that because it's a fungible token.
The amount of Bitcoin is fixed.
Yes,
the value
it's a fungible
token.
Like
the value non-fungible. Yeah.
Right.
We shouldn't talk about this. We're like the last three people you should have talking about this kind of thing, because I know less than Sam. Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, I mean, just for the sake of our listeners, they can know that if you're confused about it, so are we. So we're all learning about this.
We're all learning. Yeah. We are all learning together.
But you can still come to NRN and get your cryptocurrency news from two editors in particular who are much smarter on this topic than the three of us.
Yes, very much. They are very smart about it.
Just look for Lisa's and Joanna's bylines, and you're in great hands.
Yes, they are very smart. They know what they're talking about. They've done a lot of research.
100%.
Yes.